If you didn't see, rookie quarterback Bo Nix just got some really encouraging news heading into his NFL debut this Sunday against the Seattle Seahawks. And it came from one of his new teammates, wide receiver Josh Reynolds, who was on a local radio station talking about the upcoming season and, of course, Bo Nix. And here's what the wideout had to say. I mean, Bo Nix compared to kind of just, everybody I've played with, man, he's got a beautiful ball, man. He can place wherever he wants to. He can put it on the line. He can have touch with it. He's got an amazing arm. And I'm excited to see how he kind of progresses and continues to take charge of this offense. This is exactly what you want to hear going into week one if you're a Broncos fan, right? We've heard and seen a lot of the Bo Nix hype, and hey, a lot of it's been fair so far. He has delivered in the preseason, but that's just preseason football. He's playing up against backups, so you don't want to make too big of a deal of cooking the second and third stringers from the Colts and whatnot. But when you've got a teammate like Josh Reynolds who has been around the block, he's been on a handful of teams. He just finished the season with Jared Goff and the Lions, who just got a revitalized and rejuvenated quarterback. He was with the Rams. For Josh Reynolds to say, that's not, crazy news, but I do think it's very encouraging for Broncos fans to hear that from a veteran and experienced wide receiver. Now, Nix comes off one of the most prolific collegiate experiences, really. 5 seasons, 3 years at Auburn, 2-year starter for the Oregon Ducks, where he went 51 total touchdowns to 3 interceptions in his final season, FBS record for number of starts by a quarterback. And then in the preseason, there were questions about the arm talent coming into the draft. And, hey, would his style of play translate well to the NFL after primarily being a dink and dunk quarterback at Oregon? And it's just preseason, so we sure definitely want to wait till the regular season before we start crowning him or anything like that. But I don't think the preseason could have gone any better for Bo Nix. But ultimately, he must be the solution. This is a fan base that has experienced a lot of heights and a lot of great accomplishments, right? 3 Super Bowls, double that, and then some Super Bowl appearances. For a franchise that had a very slow start to its origin, to what they did with John Elway and Peyton Manning, unfortunately, the last decade has been brutal. That's putting it lightly. But hopefully, Bo Nix can be the solution. And we'll talk about that in more detail in just a second. But if you are ready for the Bo Nix era to get underway, hit that thumbs up button. And I want to get to 1,000 likes. His number's 10. 10,000 likes would definitely be a little ambitious, but let's shoot for 1,000 likes, and let's start the season off on a good note. Now, the Broncos, as we all know, have not gotten back to the mountaintop since winning the Super Bowl in 2015. In fact, they've only had one winning season since, and no playoff appearances since that win in February in San Francisco, or in the Bay Area in Santa Clara against the Carolina Panthers. But take a stroll down memory lane for me if you're brave enough, because I hope that at the end of this stroll, we will see a green pasture in front of us with Bo Nix and Sean Payton hand in hand, taking Broncos Country back to the top. But of course, our story, if you will, really begins when Peyton Manning retired. March 2016, the month after the Super Bowl, which I didn't find as a, huge shocker. He had played 18 seasons. He had just won a Soupy. To me, it seemed right that he would kind of ride off into the sunset on that high note after an injury-plagued 2015 year. But this is really where I think the beginning of the end is for the Broncos in about the last 8 or 9 years. Paxton Lynch drafted in round number 1. The Broncos jumped up a couple of spots to get the Memphis quarterback, and this was the beginning of what would be a very tumultuous and 13 different starting quarterback run with no solution. In fact, Paxton Lynch, if you guys don't recall, he did not even start his rookie season, right? He lost the job to the previous year's 7th-round draft pick, Trevor Siemian, out of Northwestern, who, by the way, would quietly be the best quarterback since Peyton Manning retired. You could make that argument. He's the only one with a winning record since then. Fast forward to the next offseason, and a Broncos fan favorite, Gary Kubiak, who had been with the franchise in different forms and in different roles for a long period of time, from player to coach, ultimately resigns. It was a very tough way to go out just because of all the health incidents he had going into the last few months of his tenure as the Broncos head coach. But he resigns, and now you're really starting to lose what was that winning formula in 2015 with Manning gone and the head coach gone all in a 13, 14-month span after winning the Super Bowl. Then you fast forward to a week later when Vance Joseph is hired as the team's 15th, 16th head coach in franchise history. And Vance Joseph was a great leader of men, but from an X's and O's and a production standpoint, it just wasn't quite there. Then we get John Elway's biggest mistake as a GM, which is passing on Josh Allen, going with Bradley Chubb at pick number 5 out of NC State when Josh Allen was there and would go to the Bills 2 picks later. And man, how different this franchise could be if they just took Josh Allen and didn't try and get a little bit more production or have more patience with Paxton Lynch. No, blast him to the sun, go get Josh Allen, and this franchise is on a whole different trajectory. Now, we're going to go down more of this rabbit hole in just a moment. But first, I got to tell everyone watching about our great sponsor, Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One thing I really like about Game Time is their all-in pricing option. There's nothing worse than spending like 30 minutes going over different sites, trying to find the best value. Then you get to the checkout and you realize, oh, there's $50 of taxes and fees tacked on. Well, I'm kind of starting all over again. With Game Time, you can just start right from the beginning with all-in pricing. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem code CHAT Sports for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Moving along in what's been a very depressing run for the Broncos after the Super Bowl. Not trying to bum anyone out, but I think at the end of this, it's going to have a nice ending, hopefully. January 2019. Vance Joseph is fired after 2 seasons, going 11-21. And then that brings on the Vic Fangio era, which I would say was one of the better eras. And that's not saying a whole lot, but they got some good games out of Vic Fangio. And similar to Vance Joseph and Nathaniel Hackett, like it was poor quarterback play that I wouldn't say was the ultimate blow, but for Vic Fangio, it really was because he had a really good defense while he was there. But the rotation at quarterback, that's what really kind of got the axe for him. Now, on a very somber and unfortunate note, in June 2019, Broncos owner Pat Bowlen passes away. He had somewhat stepped away from the team from like a day-to-day operations back in like 2014, years before 2019. But still, now the Broncos are really starting to lose the identity of the franchise that had just won a Super Bowl not too many years ago. Quarterback's gone, head coach is gone, and the owner ultimately passes away. So now you're really heading into a different direction with a whole new crew driving the ship. November 2020, you get the Kendall Hinton game, right, where Philip Lindsay technically starts at quarterback and the Wildcat takes the first snap. I feel like this moment right here, well, it might just look back at as kind of a funny, like, quirky game in NFL history. I think for the Broncos, it's not a funny or quirky game, right? It's a moment of like, wow, I understand that the pandemic dealt every team a tough, hand and everyone had obstacles to overcome, but no other team had to start a wide receiver at quarterback. And for me, this felt like a moment where things were really starting to slip away for the Broncos, and they were starting to become no longer one of the proud and esteemed franchises, but the one franchise that started a wide receiver at quarterback. October 2021, Von Miller is traded. This is really when this franchise takes on or heads in a new direction. And I don't think this trade was a bad idea. Like, he's a Broncos legend. He's going to get his number retired. He's going to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's a Bronco forever. I don't care where else he went after playing for Denver, Rams, Bills, anywhere else in the future. He's a Bronco for life. But the Broncos moving out from Von Miller, now you're really starting to turn a corner from what led to so much of the success for that run with Peyton Manning. January 2022, Vic Fangio is fired after a 19-30 record. His only bright spot was at one point the team was 7-6 before losing their last 4 games in the 2021 season. So for a moment it looked like they could have maybe snuck into the playoffs, but no. Then you get the Nathaniel Hackett hire. And this was a hire that was followed by a lot of rumors of, hey, maybe an Aaron Rodgers trade is going to be next. Ultimately, that's not what happened. And I will forever want to know, how much of the Nathaniel Hackett hire was motivated by the possibility of trading for Aaron Rodgers, or were the two completely separate and just a little bit of a coincidence that a quarterback who was on the trade market was also buddy-buddy with who the Broncos just hired a head coach? I feel like there's more than just a coincidence going on there. Now, fast forward 2 months later, and the Broncos trade for Russell Wilson. And if you remember, this is 2.5 years from now, 2 years and change, vibes were at an all-time high. This is the moment where we thought, okay, the last 5, 6, 7 years of misery is over. You got Hackett, who everyone has been raving about. Everyone loves the energy. All the players are in love with his coaching style. And then you get Russell Wilson, who is likely going to be a future Hall of Famer. Well, we know what happens over the next 2 seasons. And Nathaniel Hackett didn't even last a full season. He's fired the day after Christmas after a blowout loss to the Rams, finishing his tenure 4-11 with a really talented roster that just resulted in poor management, especially week 1, when you trotted out Brandon McManus for a 64-yarder and let all that time just wipe off the clock when you have a timeout, and Peyton Manning on the Manning cast is screaming from his couch, call timeout, call timeout. And even Eli's like, what are they doing? Call timeout, call timeout. That right there was a tone setter for the next season. January 2023, Sean Payton traded from the Saints to the Broncos. In a hefty transaction, the Broncos gave up a first-round draft pick and a third and received Sean Payton and a second in hopes of, okay, no more messing around a head coach. We tried Vance Joseph, first-time head coach. Didn't work out. We went with a little bit of an older but still first-time head coach in Vic Fangio. Didn't work out. Then we tried a young, up-and-coming offensive guru, Nathaniel Hackett. Failure. Let's go get a proven winner, Super Bowl winning head coach Sean Payton. And if that costs a first and a third, so be it. Well, we know what happens next year. And this takes us to pretty much present day. March 2024, Russell Wilson released after 2 seasons in Denver, 1 season with Sean Payton, and the Broncos pick up an $85 million dead cap hit because they believe he is that much of a detriment to the team. So, here we are, going into week 1 against the Seahawks. Sean Payton with his brand new rookie quarterback, Bo Nix, hand in hand, and hopefully putting an end to what was an awful run that we just spent the last 5 minutes reliving. But if you believe that better days are coming for Broncos Country, drop a DEN in the comment section. I can't think of a better way to end the video than a nice little morale lifter after a depressing second half of the episode. But I think it's important to remember as we kind of embark on this new journey, not to sound like a wedding pastor, but it's important to reflect on what was a really tough stretch for a very proud franchise and a very successful one. I mean, this is up there with the New York Jets in terms of teams that have won a Super Bowl and have not made the playoffs in 7 straight years, 8 straight years. These are somewhat unprecedented stretches for franchises with this much success. So hopefully, Sean Payton and Bo Nix can take the Broncos back to the top. And sure, Josh Reynolds' comments might just seem like, hey, that's a receiver pumping up his quarterback, and that's probably what they are. But you know what? This fan base, they need that right now because it's been a long time since they've heard anything like that.